Baby, CreepTime the podcast is going on tour and coming to a city near you.
So head over to creeptime.com to get your tickets to come see CreepTime live.
Well, you can't trust County.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to CreepTime the podcast. Another week closer to tour, Stu.
Baby, it's like grind time, like creepers every day. It's more and more tour stuff, but we're getting, oh my God. I started to get like little old pangs of like before we went out on tour years ago. The feeling of just like the prep work and everything. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be so surreal.
That hasn't hit me quite as hard just yet. But I think that's coming next month. I think that's when it's really going to sink in. Like once we start like planning out strategy of like, okay, what does the truck pack kind of look like? That's what I think it's going to click in for me, like old tour vibes of like,
God, not a truck pack.
We low-key kind of have to have like a packing system. But anyway, for anybody who's still interested and hasn't gotten their tickets and they are considering it, please head over to creeptime.com where you can get your tickets to come see us on tour. They should, right?
Yes, of course. Oh my gosh, our little Western. It's kind of fun that we're just doing Western dates too.
I know. I think I'm most excited for this because this is kind of all the stuff we didn't hit on the original tour that we did. We never did any Western cities. So we're both going to be, I mean, have you been to any of the ones that we're going to other than Los Angeles and Denver?
I've been to Phoenix just like very briefly, but I haven't been to Albuquerque. I know we both are excited about Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I haven't been
to Sacramento.
I don't think I've been to Phoenix either. I have been to Albuquerque. I went there. I saw the Breaking Bad house. Sick.
Oh my God. When was that?
When was I last there? I was with Mel, so I had to be driving there, but I was like, where was I driving? I think we were just on a road trip. It might have been our road trip where we went to the dunes in Colorado and then we like moved down south and we eventually got to Albuquerque. But yeah, we were there for a minute, but I haven't seen Sacramento. I've never been to Portland, Seattle, Salt Lake City, none of it.
Well, we're excited, babies. I cannot wait to see everybody too. Like that's the craziest part. Seeing the comments come in and I'm like, oh my God, we're actually going to see these people. I
can't wait. I can't wait to meet some of them after the show too. Like that's,
I know.
I'm so stoked about it. We'll get off our soapbox, but creepers, please, again, if you are considering getting tickets, head over today to creeptime.com. We would love to see you at one of the Western cities. I am excited. I have that nervous feeling, of course, but I'm going to tuck that away because we have a very interesting case to discuss today, which I'm going to jump straight into a top line for. And I'd be curious if you've actually heard about it because you've inspired me from the last case you covered, where I also wanted to look to something that was kind of reminiscent of early creep time with a young man who went missing. I don't know if you've opened the link just yet, but before you do, you did? Okay.
I did.
You did. Okay.
You're like, just as I thought.
Well, the way I phrased it, I don't know if you've opened the link yet, but before you do it, you go, it's open.
I go, I did. And that I did, baby.
No, that's totally
fine. I only see his name. I did not spend time on it.
Well, I should ask you about the name. Do you recognize the name at all? Trevor Deely.
For some reason, it does sound really familiar, but I know I say that a lot, but it does sound familiar.
It was a very famous case, and this is a non-U.S. case, which I feel like that's the differentiator, what makes this different from the previous ones that we used to do of young male disappearances in early creep time. This is a case out of Ireland, which I can't remember the last time we did a case out of Ireland.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I can't remember either.
This is an eerie story. I have a lot to go through with this, and it is a proper disappearance. We are going to discuss the timeline, the investigations, some of the theories, but I'm just going to give everybody a quick top line so they know what we're getting into. So to credit this, I'll first give credit where credit is due to the recent suggestion that came in from, I believe it was Competitive Cup 9692 on Reddit. Maybe I'll show you a competitive cup.
Sorry, creepers.
I knew that's where your mind went too. I knew it.
Just nasty and foul before we get into something very dark and sinister.
Yeah, well, I think this, to be fair, I think this suggestion had come in a while ago and it was like, oh, we will get to that case eventually because I kind of knew my own top line of it, but this was the most recent suggestion I saw. So thank you again to that user on Reddit who suggested it. And if you want to suggest more cases for anybody who's listening, head over to CreepTime, the podcast on Reddit. That's where we check all of the case suggestions and we talk about cases that we've already discussed on the show. We share photos and videos, etc. So let's get into our setup here. Why I find this so strange. So I'm going to take us back to a very specific date and place because our story, as I said, comes out of Ireland. It was the night of December 7th, turning into December 8th, so very late into the night, and the year was 2000 in Dublin. On this night, there was a company Christmas party that would take place that eventually moved to several different locations, different bars for drinks, hanging out, and eventually one of those final stops happened to be this nightclub called Buck Whaley's. This was at around 3:25 a.m. that night, where 22-year-old Trevor Deely, a very responsible and kind-hearted employee of this company, he departed the drinks, he said his goodbyes, and he began to head out on foot. Now, this is important timeline-wise, we would learn, because Trevor had walked on foot to his office that late in the night. And there were a number of things that he did there once he got in. He had security let him in, he talked to a coworker, he had a cup of tea, possibly a cup of coffee, he checked his emails, and then he set out on foot again. I should also mention he grabbed an umbrella because it was storming heavily on this night. So he heads out at around 4 a.m., just after, but something goes wrong as soon as he leaves. You see, before Trevor actually had entered into the office, there is this infamous CCTV video, again, amazing, from the year 2000, where he appears to approach the gate outside of his office, and there is a man dressed in all black, kind of a heavy-set guy who's just standing out there, who was seemingly waiting for him. He had been there for a half hour before Trevor arrived. The two talked. Trevor got let inside. Trevor stayed inside for roughly a half hour. The man outside leaves. Trevor goes out on foot. And we see Trevor walking for roughly 11 minutes on film. There's a gap in that, but the last time we see him is about 11 minutes later. That is the last known sighting of Trevor. He has never been seen since. So the question persists to this day. Can we make sense of some of his final foot traffic and why he returned to his office, why he took the path he did, but most importantly, who was the mysterious man who was seen outside of his office waiting for him? Just initial thoughts on the strangeness of this story.
Can we talk about, just real quick, the guy that was outside? So he comes out, Trevor, this mysterious man is there, and they talk for how long?
So it's actually the opposite. So when Trevor had first walked, the timeline's a little confusing on this, and also the figures that are seen on camera might also confuse you because at a certain point, it's not actually just one man. There are two other men who approach. I'll get into that a little bit later about who we would find out they are. But he had approached coming to his office, got to the gate, and before he called security, this man was already waiting out there. It was like he expected Trevor to show up in a weird way. So Trevor,
but like presumably maybe a coworker or something, but we just don't know.
It has no. I would say I'm going to say no, purely because this case is now close to 25 years old, and nobody has ever come forward who was a coworker of his to say like, "Oh, that was me." I will spoil a little bit of this, but the other two figures that do show up around the same time to the gate were identified later on as two of his coworkers. And we're going to discuss some of that in the theories and like try to figure out like why they were there, like what's that about. But to be fair, most of the staff was out that night drinking and it was very late into the night. I think most of them did have work the next morning, which is insane. Trevor did, at least. And I just thought it was strange that they would show up, but maybe not, because it was Dublin and people were on foot because there was a taxi strike going on at the time. I tried to make sense of it. Investigators did question them and they didn't find anything suspicious with those two coworkers, but it was strange that there is a third component, a third figure who was never identified in that footage.
How weird. And 11 minutes of him just kind of wandering down the street or in that same vicinity.
He was, we're going to get into that in a little bit, but he technically was walking in the direction to go back to his apartment because it was storming. So the presumption is that he stopped at the office to grab an umbrella, maybe make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and stay up for the walk because, again, it's a taxi strike. He has to get home on foot. but the path he took was a little. I'm getting so ahead of myself. It's insane.
Well, it's my fault. I'm like,
but
in
no,
this,
but I'm so interested to talk about it that I'm like,
Yeah.
the path he took, which we'll discuss in depth, was very strange. It wasn't like it seemed like he crossed the street and it wasn't a clear-cut path on a normal street that would have taken him directly to his apartment. They believe he might have added something like, which, to be fair, like when I first read that, I'm like, well, some people have like their path they like to take on their way, like their route, right?
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, well, this is the way that I go. This is the way I know to get home, even if it adds like 5 extra minutes. That was not this. I did not know this the first time I looked at this, but the path he took would have added something like 25 to 30 minutes.
Mm.
That's significant.
That is significant.
It's strange.
Very weird.
But that's what we've got. But
It's
before we're...
giving
Oh, sorry.
Birds in the Tank a little bit. I know I said that on my last case, but like the running or like
Yeah.
kind of the footage kind of being the last thing we've got.
I actually was going to say Brian Schaefer. That's what I kept thinking of. And can I also just say, before we're going to get into this, I had the weirdest experience last night while researching. I finished up the latter half of the research to this case last night. And I had this experience. I don't know if you've ever had this before, but while I was researching, I got a really intense, overwhelming sense that I was being watched. I can't. I know I sound insane right now, but
No, you don't. Well, let me tell you, there are people sometimes that are behind, like in your camera view, that walk back and forth. So.
No, this was like late at night though, and like all my blinds were closed and everything. But while I was finishing up the research, and I wish I marked it down, like which part of the research I got to, because I had the same strange experience when we talked about Michael Negrete. While I got to a certain part of the research, I all of a sudden had like this shift where I was like, I feel like you can sense like a presence around you, as if like somebody's in the room. That's how I felt. And I thought about, I was like, should I tell Stu that, or am I going to sound insane? But I really did feel something strange like that.
That's so spooky.
I'll remember which part it was when I get to that part in the research,
yeah,
but that it freaked me out a little bit. I think I went to bed actually.
Oh my God. I don't know if I get the feeling I'm being watched, but sometimes when I do research, if something really like hits me in my gut about a case, like I feel like a gut feeling about what could have happened, I psych myself into being like, am I in touch with spirit right now?
Well, that's why I always say, I'm like, what are you downloading? Because I do believe I'm like, Stu has a sense for like certain things like this. So when I like talk about a certain thing, I feel like it reads like a book when I'm always like, how do you feel about that? Because I'm looking to see like what your ESP says.
Like,
well, I'm going to dive into this full story here. But before I do, I guess we should give a warm welcome back to all of the creepers, shouldn't we?
Hi, creepers. Yeah,
Hi,
welcome back.
babies.
Welcome to 2025. Is this our first episode of 2025?
Is it actually?
Right? Oh, no.
Wait, isn't it? No, because didn't we record? Because we recorded the last episode before 2025.
That's right. It's our first recording of 2025.
And that's the truth, baby.
And that's that on that, baby.
Well, we just want to thank you guys so much for stopping by. If you're brand new, please make sure to stick around. You can follow or subscribe to the show. You can hit the bell notification. I think if you're on Spotify, it just looks like a little bell, and you can slap that. Slap it, baby. And you're going to get a notification anytime we drop a surprise episode just for you, so you always stay in the know. We would also recommend if you could, leave a review for the show, whether you're listening on Amazon or Apple. If you're on Spotify, I think you can just hit those 3 little dots and that says like leave a review, and you should be able to do it that way. That is immensely helpful for the show.
Yes.
And oh my God, I should also say, I had this written down in my notes somewhere. I have stuff scattered everywhere. I saw on Reddit that somebody had shared CreepTime the podcast into like a really large Facebook group. Can we just say thank you on behalf of both of us? That is so, so helpful. Like there's a lot of things that are helpful for like supporting the show and benefiting the show and growing it, but that is immensely helpful. You have no idea. So thank you so much.
So sweet. We appreciate it so much. And you know what? We never acknowledged this either. Somebody that worked at like a bookstore put our QR code on a bunch of true crime books. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. I want to give a shout out to that creeper too.
I still think about that. Yeah. I could have sworn maybe we mentioned it on an After Dark. The line is kind of blurred, but yeah, that was awesome. That was so amazing.
We love y'all.
They're the best. They're so sweet. But thank you guys again for everybody who is continuing to support the show. And again, for anybody who is new, welcome. If you don't know us, my name is Silas. This is Stu. Freudian slip. I thought we reversed that for a second.
Stu.
And we come out with new episodes every Friday, and this is no different. So with that said, shall we talk? Oh, wait, no. We have to talk a little bit about Magic Mind. Sorry.
I was going to say, and clink, clink.
I haven't had one
right
yet today. Yes. Okay, that's what we have to tell you guys. So Magic Mind, I think this might be the last week they're doing it in January, but they are running a January special, or they are doing a bundle deal for Magic Mind. So for anybody who's already tried it or is thinking about trying it and they still want to get a deal, you can get 45% off not only regular Magic Mind, but they now have the Sleep Shot out. They are bundling them into one package so you can get both for 45% off.
Mm-hmm.
My God. With the code down below, I think you can use the link magicmind.com/CreepTimeJan, and that is going to automatically apply your 45% discount. And that is
That's amazing.
Hefty discount.
Yeah, because Magic Mind works, which means that it's not the cheapest. So that discount, take advantage of it, y'all, because it's amazing stuff and it works. So
it does. I mean, if I could just speak a little bit about that Sleep Shot, because you know all of the run-of-the-mill stuff about regular Magic Mind, which, by the way, I hope they don't crucify me for this. I had 3 of them yesterday.
Okay, I'm literally foaming at the mouth because I want to take the Sleep Shot right now, but I don't want to fall asleep on
Don't do it, baby.
I'm like, it's so yummy.
But it has all the same stuff that you would love about regular Magic Mind. It's non-habit forming. The formulation is great. They've really reformulated and kind of perfected the taste of it to make sure they can still include all of the core ingredients that make it work. And I don't know, I have such a reliance on them now in a really good way, where it is a part of my routine. It's a part of my morning ritual usually to have them. Mm-hmm. Although today is a bit different because there's some wild stuff going on outside, so I'm a little disjointed.
I know, baby. Oh my God, yeah.
But please, if you are considering trying Magic Mind, if you want to get a deal on that bundle, please make sure to get 45% off. We want you to get the deal. Magic Mind wants you to get the deal. And you can use the link again down in our description, magicmind.com/CreepTimeJan.
Jan, Jan.
True, Jan.
And truly,
sure,
the
Jan.
more you take it, the better it works. So take advantage of a heavy discount like this, because that way you can get enough product that you really do, because it's designed to work over time. So make sure you take advantage of it. I certainly would.
Agreed. I think I hit my stride with it maybe like 2 weeks in was when I really started to feel like the full effects, where I'm like, this has made a significant difference in like how my brain works.
Mm-hmm. Tis tradition.
Tis tradition, baby.
I do have a regular one here, so maybe I'll just take that real quick.
Do you? Wait, hold on. I'm not even looking at you on camera. I got to check it.
Oh, are you?
Baby, this is my other Magic Mind from the McCafe.
The McCafe. And look at those cups. My God, the illustration. They're really going hard.
Honestly, it looks like something they're trying to get rid of from like winter 2013 or something. And we've got a backed up inventory. So anyway, shall we dive into this case?
Let's dive in.
Okay. Oh, I didn't even acknowledge. Now that I'm on camera, I'm remembering I have a mustache. I chose violence yet again, as I told you.
And I will come for anybody that comes for your mustache, because I personally am obsessed with it. Team Bella's dad.
That's a good costume idea. We should do Twilight.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'd have to perfect. Well, actually, no. I would want to be like Edward Cullen or something ridiculous. But
you got the wig for
Zach
it.
Bagans
yeah,
wig.
I was gonna say you could totally reuse Zach Bagans' wig. I could do Bella's dad, but I kind of want to use those contacts again.
Yes.
Oh my God, we're 20 minutes in. I have to start. Okay, I'm starting. Okay, so Trevor Deely. Where do we begin with his story? So Trevor, let's first discuss where he's from, when he was born. He was born on August 15th, 1978 in, I believe it's pronounced Naas, Naas. This is in County Kildare of Ireland. Please, baby, don't come for me. I'm American and I don't know what I'm doing. But I looked at a map of this. This is kind of like centrally eastern, if you look at a map of Ireland. His parents were Michael Deely and Andy Lee Deely, and Trevor was the youngest brother of 4 in total. So he had 3 older siblings. And while, of course, this is not always the case, I am just going to talk about this because I think it might be the case for Trevor. All of his older siblings had kind of helped to shape a little bit of who Trevor was. I think sometimes there is a thing, and you could tell me if you've seen this with your younger siblings, they have such an example of sort of watching you and kind of watching your success or your failures that they grow up very mature and very savvy, I often think. Again, it's not a blanket statement, but that is kind of what I saw when I was researching Trevor, is that he just seemed to be kind of a well-adjusted, mature, and sort of brilliant mind from a young age. And we would see that in some of his school performance as well. But I wanted to call that out very quickly. And I also want to say that he was very different from his older siblings because they all kind of grew up as these student athletes and they were very involved with sports at school. That was not Trevor. He kind of broke from the pack, broke from the mold in that way, where he actually wasn't very athletic at all. But he learned that he could excel in academics, specifically math and sciences, or as they'd say in the UK, maths, plural. Would you agree with that, though? I should ask you. Would you agree that the youngest sibling usually matures a little faster?
Yeah, I feel like the youngest sibling, not only are they savvier and they kind of watch the mistakes that have been made before them, so they're better prepared, but I also tend to think there's a little bit of maybe not full like anxiety that manifests, but it's like, okay, can I achieve all the things that my siblings have achieved? There's a little bit of a pressure there to, make something out of themselves the way they've watched their siblings make something out of themselves.
It's interesting I agree with you, but it's interesting you bring that up because, and I'm not going to throw this on as a blanket statement, but from the interviews that I have watched specifically with his older siblings, I'm going to point to his brother. It almost seemed like their relationship to him, because they all did very well. They were all very successful kids later in life, but it seems the way that they had their relationship to Trevor was that they set a tone of expectation that he was to achieve something, which I think you often see from the parents. You don't always see that from older siblings.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting and kind of unique to their family dynamic.
Totally. Especially with a lot of siblings. I mean, I'm sure that like adds to
Yeah.
compounds.
I mean, I think he had one older brother and two older sisters as well, but they were all very similar in that way. Again, all student athletes, all kind of overachievers, did very well in life. I believe his brother went on to become an optometrist. So the bar was high. So Trevor, the youngest little brother, he was described from an early age to be very soft-spoken. Again, he was very polite and he was very friendly and likable. I saw that word used a lot in the research that I read. He was very likable, which I don't think applies to just everybody, but it made sense to me that he was a smart kid, but also not entirely shy. He was willing to go out and make friends and approach people, possibly something that could play into what we would see on camera on that CCTV footage. So most of his siblings, like I said, student athletes, he grows up in this academic circle where he's trying to break from the pack, and he starts to really excel in the academic world with math and science, as I mentioned. And he was such a strong student that as he started to approach adulthood and he was getting to college age, he was trying to fixate on, what is my path? What should I be doing? So the college that he ends up attending, let's see if I have it here. It was the Waterford Institute of Technology, which I did a map of this. I think it's like something like 90 minutes to 2 hours away from his hometown. So it's not terribly far, but it's also not terribly close. He goes there for one semester. And I believe he just started generally in kind of like business, economics. Wasn't for him. He felt like he wasn't fitting in. He felt like this wasn't something he felt passionate about. And truthfully, from the way he described it to friends and family, he felt kind of lost. So he ends up leaving that institution, right? He leaves that school, he comes back home, and he's not really sure what he wants to do or where his path is. And I think it was his older sister, Michelle. I believe it was Michelle who made this recommendation. But she was like, hey, if something's not clicking and you don't want to be in school, maybe you should just take a class in like Dublin or something. And it was the year 1999. So she found these computer classes and she was like, would you want to try this? Again, older siblings kind of advocating for like you to excel, a unique thing to this family. She's like, how about you take these computer classes? So he's like, okay, I'll try it. He ends up taking the computer classes in Dublin. Loves it. He's like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, I want to be in like the tech world, early adopter to working on computers, helping to deal with things in like an IT sector. So he excels with that. And it does so well for him that by the time he leaves those classes, he has job offers coming in from multiple different companies. Yeah, it was a great thing to get involved with, I guess, in like the year 1999. But this is actually interesting because he's still pretty young at this point. He's only like 20, 21 when the job offers start coming in, and he doesn't really know how to field them. So he turns to his dad, Mark, and he's like, hey, what do you think I should do? Like, which of these offers do you think would be a good idea? And the chilling irony of this is that his dad, Mark, says, because one of the offers came in from Bank of Ireland to be like, I think an asset management professional, work in the IT department. I don't know how those two were correlated, but they were in 1999. his dad's like, you should go with the bank because a bank is very safe. Like it's really stable. But he specifically said the word safe, which is horrifically ironic in the context of where Trevor would go missing from his office.
Oh, I'm sure his dad carries that guilt with him all the time.
Well, I mean, he has a best friend who actually he called multiple times that night who never got a call. I keep thinking about that best friend and the guilt that he might have with this as well. But that was a totally unforeseen circumstance of like phone tag, and it was late at night. It's a different part of the story. But that's where everything kind of comes to. Trevor is finally going to accept a job offer, and he starts to work at Bank of Ireland. Just initial thoughts on where we're at with his backstory and how his life is starting to come together and unfold at this age.
Yeah, well, it's weird because on the surface, he seems like he's kind of got it all together. I know there was like a little bit of a hiccup of going to school and but it seems like he's the type of kid to like find his, well, not even kid, he's a grown man at this point, but find his footing quickly.
He's young though. He's a young man. We should, I mean,
yeah.
22 at the time he goes vanishing.
Okay. And he just kind of seems like he's the type of person to like pick himself up fast, not to get like, I'm kind of thinking of, the parallels between him and maybe Jason from last week that I think Jason kind of like fell into the stumbling, whereas it seems like Trevor was like pretty active about like, okay, how do I find something else? And he comes from a family where they're like, okay, here's an opportunity, like just seems like he's a pretty ambitious and like motivated person.
I would absolutely agree with your assessment of it. And I also think I want to point out too that dropping out of school and leaving school doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's like falling apart. You can be a young adult and like go to school or go to a certain program and be like, this is not for me. And you're not necessarily struggling. You're just like, I don't think I want to stay on this track. And if I don't know exactly what I want to do, why would I spend the money right now? Or why would I be in school?
Yeah, it's a very mature decision I think he made.
Yeah, I mean, it ended up being the right one, I guess, because he was fielding job offers at like 21 from like high profile companies. So he starts work, right? I guess we should get back on track with like what actually happens at the job and what his environment was like there, because I do think that maybe that's specific for us to discuss theories later on when it comes to the coworkers. So what do we actually know about the timeline? What led up to the event that happened on December 8th where Trevor is seen on camera and then he's not? From everything that I sourced, it did sound like Trevor got into this position, which again was described as an asset management role, but I also saw publications say like he worked specifically with the IT team. So maybe in 1999 or 2000, those two roles were like integrated somehow.
Or managing like tech assets? I don't know.
I was totally aloof to like which role he was in, but in most of the research, they do say, yes, specifically, it was like asset management, but he worked directly with computers. So he's in this position and he's pretty well adjusted to this environment from what I read. He worked with a team of roughly 10 people and his management, which I wonder, I didn't include a picture of his manager. I meant to. I'm sorry. I wanted to include some pictures that I could find of like the staff he worked around, but everybody said that he was like top-notch employee. He was very well liked. He was incredibly responsible, as his manager described him. He was reliable. And his manager also used the word perfect a lot of the time.
Wow.
I don't know if there's like a dark undertone to that, with sometimes like with perfectionists, something else is brewing under the surface, but his manager said he was a perfect employee. He was also continuing to carry out his social life as it would seem. And we're going to call back to this a little later on because for a period of time while he was working there, it would seem that he started to talk to a girl who was not from Ireland. She was visiting, but we're going to reference back to that later on because as we would learn, nobody actually ever met this girl. Her name was allegedly Karen, but nobody ever met her. She wasn't from Ireland. She was just visiting. A little mysterious. So I'm unsure. I'll piggyback onto that Karen thing, and I hesitated on whether or not I wanted to just include this in this section of the research because I'm unsure if it's relevant. However, I am going to mention before we're going to discuss the timeline of the night in relation to Karen. He had, he didn't purchase. He was given a ticket by a good friend of his to leave Ireland and fly to Alaska, to Anchorage, for Karen, apparently. This girl that nobody had met.
So do you know how they met? Like, did they meet in
They met in Dublin.
Ireland?
Yeah, they met
Okay,
in
so maybe she
Dublin.
was like visiting or something, and then
That's the presumption, is that she was visiting and they stayed in like long distance contact, although it was like casual and not very serious. And then I had always thought in the story while I was reading it, I was like, oh, well, they must have been long distance where she's like, come visit me in Anchorage. I saw several reports that he showed up unannounced, which I think is
yikes. Yeah.
very specific to like the context of what happens here, because we would learn that he goes missing 2 days after he arrives back in Ireland from that flight. So he had apparently flown to Anchorage. He got this ticket through a friend of his who I think was a flight attendant, and he went there for free, basically. And this part of the story is kind of murky. Nobody knows like what the details were and how that trip went, if it was good, if it was bad. But he does return to Ireland, I believe, on December 5th of that year. And I'm also going to say that there is no written record of a Karen that they found in like any of his emails. It turns out that he might have actually been talking to multiple girls, unless this was the same girl, because what his dad would find later on when he searched his email was correspondence with a girl that he was planning to try to meet up with, I think in Los Angeles, because the plane was going to touch down in LA first. And her name was Jamie. No record of a Karen anywhere.
Interesting.
And it looks
Okay.
like Jamie declined too, because he was like, hey, I'm going to be in LA for like 48 hours or something while I catch a connecting flight that's going to take me to Anchorage. Do you want to meet up? And she was like, I can't, I'm busy.
I don't want to skip ahead, so stop me if this is a prompt that will.
No,
But
please, let's dig into it. There's a lot here.
Is there a thought that Karen and or Jamie are not like? Are they really like girls that he was having dates with, that he was pursuing relationships with, or like a one-time hookup meetup situation?
That part is unclear because, again, he
Okay.
was pretty. I mean, the way that they were, at least, first of all, Jamie's never mentioned to any of his friends or family. People are like, who the hell is Jamie? Karen was
Yeah.
the only one they had ever heard about. But from the way he described it, it was casual, but it seemed like more of a thing that they had been dating. But again, to show up to someone halfway across the world unannounced is a bit of a bold move when it's casual.
Right. Well, and especially for, I don't want to like generalize, but like a young guy like that who's kind of in his prime, who could kind of probably go out and date and meet a bunch of girls locally in Dublin. I mean, to make a trek like that says something.
He must have. I mean, granted, the ticket was free, but like that's a long investment of your time. Like it's a
Yeah.
long plane ride, and also you got to deal
At
with your
22.
accommodations. Like you have no plan once you get there.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder, was it when he showed up that he wasn't well received? And that is maybe the inciting incident for something that could have happened.
Sure.
We'll discuss it in the theories, I guess. But do you get a sense for him, like looking at the pictures with that context, that something could be going on here? I don't know how you feel.
I mean, he looks like the likability factor does come across in these photos. Like he's got
I
kind of a
agree.
cheeky smile. He looks like he could be sort of the life of the party from like one of the pictures on the first page. But I mean, again, I always think that this age specifically for young men is it's a time, like we've seen it over and over again. And like when you're really trying to find your footing, whether that's career wise or relationship wise or whatever, like this is a time where I think a lot of young guys are like trying to find themselves. So the likability factor and the, friendliness can be a cover for something that's deeper, especially when you said the perfectionist thing. I was like, yeah, I mean, I feel like a tale as old as time. People that are so hyper focused on everything being perfect, there's something, the mental health factor sometimes isn't always great there. Like you're putting so much energy into making sure everything's perfect because things aren't perfect up here.
I agree. Or I also wonder too, like, if it's not quite like a mental health crisis, could it have been that this is a formative age where he has spent so much of his life in a controlled mode with himself, where he's like, I have to achieve this, I have to be perfect with this, or I have to do this, that maybe this might have been one of the first times that he was starting to, I don't know if lash out, creepers, you can tell me if there's a better word for this that you think, but like lash out was the word that came to mind, where he's like, I want to do something bold. I want to live my life in a way that's like a little riskier. You know what I mean?
Kind of rebel against the conformities that he's known.
Yeah, it's like rebelling against yourself in a way. It's an interesting thing that's going on there psychologically. But I guess the big question is, how does any of this relate to and play into the night of December 7th, 2000? So that's what I want to discuss now. I will call attention to something that is pretty interesting in this story, but I thought it was bizarre that this started around like a Christmas party. So I do think there is something, and people will also crucify me for this. I do think there is something strange about like disappearances happening around the holidays. And I think there could be something there with like a little bit of seasonal depression or stress that could add to something like this. But I'll discuss what was actually happening and then I'll let you decide. So Trevor, he was working on the day of this party, right? December 7th, working for most of the day. He had talked to his dad at a certain point during the afternoon, and he had mentioned something that I thought was odd because he said the electricity in his apartment was out, which his dad later said indicated to him that Trevor wasn't in the office all day, which was unusual. So at a certain point of the day, Trevor had gone home and then came back. Kind of bizarre because it was storming heavily that day, which is why the electricity was out. Winds upwards of 60, 70 miles per hour. And then I believe he left his office at another part of the day, and he actually went to his brother's office because he was an optometrist and he had to pick up contact lenses. So we know that Trevor kind of bounced around to a few different points before he officially left the office early for that Christmas party, which I think is marked down at around 4 or 5 p.m. So Trevor got all of his errands done, and then we shift over to the company Christmas party on behalf of Bank of Ireland. This is first going to take place at Copperface Jack's for drinks that I read, which it's not actually a bar. I think it's a nightclub, and this is, I think, a 22-minute walk from his office area. Do you see a picture of Copperface Jack's anywhere in there? It might be on the
Yes, I
third
do.
page.
Yeah, it definitely looks more clubby than what I would think of for most like company holiday parties, but maybe also that's like the lighting in this particular photo. But
No, I think that's
definitely
right.
like
I think it was clubby.
yeah, like a bumpin' looking place.
Granted, he was there pretty early, I should say, and it sounded like he went there with just a few friends from the office for a pregame before the actual company Christmas party, which was going to be at the Hilton.
Gotcha. That sounds more like the Bank of Ireland.
Exactly. Yeah. So after they had their pregame, like their pre-drinks at Copperface Jack's, they end up walking over to the sources that I saw, and they shift over to the Hilton Hotel where they are going to have drinks at that bar and apparently a very lovely dinner. So if this is the same Hilton that I believe it is from the mapping that I was looking at in his foot pattern, this also would have been about 10 minutes on foot. And again, there is a taxi strike at the time, so I'm assuming they're traveling all of this on foot. So they're moving south on Harcourt Street, and this is where they remain for a period of time that night, I think until roughly 2 in the morning. So I'm piecing together that he's drinking heavily, right? Like this is going to be a night where everybody's assuming like none of us are driving. We're all kind of walking. So I'm going to drink a lot. This puts his timeline from the Hilton to be starting there at 9 p.m. all the way until 2. But in the midst of that chunk of time, we do know something happened at 10:30, which I'm going to draw attention to. 10:30 or close to 11, he received a phone call. So he was an early adopter to cell phones. And it was from one of his best friends, Glenn Callan. So Glenn had tried to call Trevor, and I'm unsure of what the nature of that call was about. It almost sounded like after the Christmas party, him and a few work friends were also going to go out for like an afters party. And he was trying to tell like Glenn, like, hey, would you want to come out with us? I'm not sure if that's the case. I'm just assuming. But when Glenn had called at 10:30, it was way too noisy and everybody was too drunk and they couldn't really hear each other. So basically they hung up the phone and they end up playing phone tag for the rest of the night, trying to get in touch with each other. So this puts us several hours in the timeline until we reach that 2 a.m. mark. This is when Trevor and several coworkers shift over to another street to go to the after party, which is going to be at Buck Whaley's. Do you have a picture of that anywhere? That's closer to like a bar.
Yes, I do.
Definitely more of a bar vibe instead of like a club, I would say.
Yeah, very much like an after party vibe.
Yeah, like let's keep the party going. Let's get drinks, but do it in like more of a conversational setting now that we've been like drinking for a while. So this would keep them there from 2 a.m. until roughly 3:35 a.m. At this point, we know that Trevor would say his goodbyes. He leaves everybody there and he sets out on foot, and he's actually going to head over to his office, which is fairly close to this location. So he heads over to his office on the map, and the exact nature of why he was going there, again, it's a bit murky, but we can deduce from the things that he did while he was at the office. But this is where the strangeness of the story actually starts, because this is the first time that we're going to get our CCTV footage. Miraculous it's there for the year 2000.
Yeah.
So we see Trevor arriving at the gates of the office. This is just after, I believe he had left actually, maybe it might have been a little before 3:35 because I think 3:35, 3:36 is the first timestamp where he's actually seen on camera at the gates of the office, but he was very, very close. What's interesting, as I mentioned much earlier about this, is that 30 minutes before Trevor even got there, there is this mysterious, kind of heavy-set man who is dressed head to toe in all black, and he's roughly the same height, if not a little bit taller than Trevor. He had arrived at the gate and stood out there for a full half hour. This is the year 2002. Like, people don't have their cell phones to like occupy them for 30 minutes. Like, this man is deliberately waiting for something, I would assume.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Oh, for sure. I mean, the first thing I kind of thought of was like, is he kind of stalking his prey? Like, if he's planning to attack somebody, is he waiting for the right person to come on by?
Well, that's an interesting thought about it too, is I'm like, was it specific to Trevor or was it specific to just somebody who would have been coming to the bank? But also, who expects any employee to come to the bank and like try to go in and out at like 4 a.m?
I guess unless he was kind of just, was this man standing behind that gate or in
Yes.
front of it?
Well, on the other side of the gate, you can get into the offices. So he was standing on the outside of the gate.
Okay. Because I was kind of thinking like, maybe he's just hanging out, like just
Like having a
posted up
cigarette like at the
outside.
corner.
Yeah, like trying to remain aloof and like he kind of belongs there. Almost he could have even been posing as like a security guard or something, but just kind of waiting for the right person to walk by that's too drunk and he could, attack. I don't know.
Well, let me go a bit deeper into this timeline because I think you'll find the behavior here and the exchange maybe even more interesting. So we've got this timestamp, right? 3:36 a.m. That's when we see the man who's already been waiting there for a half hour, and Trevor arrives. So we've got this horrible storm outside too. It's high winds, it's raining. The strange man has been standing in that for 30 minutes, and Trevor approaches him at the gate. And of course, there's no audio because this is like 2000, but Trevor appears to talk to this man. They strike up a conversation, or it's possible they were familiar with each other. It's very difficult to see because the quality of it is pretty poor, and you might be able to see from some of the footage that I included, like the screenshots of it.
Yeah, I can see.
But they talk for several minutes, actually, at that gate. I think that reads as strange to me, but maybe it's context dependent to like Trevor being drunk, Trevor being a friendly person. It's 1999, but in a major city, I would never go up to a stranger in the middle of the night and start up a conversation.
I mean, the first thing I thought of was like, was he potentially buying drugs from someone? Because certainly I think also at that age, like you're probably already on high alert going back to although I know he was pretty intoxicated, but like going back to your office at 3:30 in the morning, if you've got anything going on up here, you're probably like, I don't want my office to think it's weird if they see me on footage, like coming back at 3:30, like how is this going to look? But clearly he was not in that frame of mind because he's just standing there having a conversation with this person. It seems like he deliberately knew he was going to meet up with this person.
That was kind of my instinct as well. I mean, just sheerly from the sheer fact that this man was stood out there for 30 minutes waiting for somebody, although I should say the investigators have never said there was any paraphernalia that was found in his apartment. And I will also say it maybe wasn't entirely unusual that he was going into his office this late because there were some coworkers in there who worked the overnight shift.
Interesting. Well, so and also just sorry, but thinking about like other like office parties I've been to and stuff, like people will like leave their coats there or they'll leave their purse and they go back later and they go get it after, the dinner or being out at the bar.
Agreed. I remember hearing a story like when I worked in media, because media hours are so insane anyway, that I think after a party there was somebody who just slept over in the office.
I've heard of that too.
No, like literally like slept under their desk, and this was like the New York branch of the company, and I was like, that's disgusting.
But it does happen.
Like morally, I found that disgusting. I was like, get out of there.
You were like, at least put a pillow underneath your freaking head.
I was like, so he just like slept in like the same, like the suit I guess he was in, or like the work clothes. It's just, I hate the idea of people sleeping over in an office. It makes me sick.
I know.
But I'll keep pressing on. So yes, Trevor, he arrived there. He struck up the conversation for several minutes with this mystery man outside. We see all of this on camera. It's very eerie. And then Trevor uses his cell phone. He calls security to let him inside to the offices. Now, like I said before, the intention of him coming back, we definitely know it was to grab the umbrella. We can deduce it was from the ridiculous storm that was going on around him outside. But while he's in there, he also does a few other things that I had mentioned before. He is going to go inside. He gets the umbrella, and then he talks to a coworker of his named Carl Pender. Carl Pender was working the overnight shift, and he kind of tries to coax him into being like, could you have a cup of coffee with me if I make some? I also read that this might have been tea. So it's either that he's trying to have coffee, I thought, to sober up, maybe for the walk home, or he's totally fine and totally lucid. I mean, Carl didn't mention that he was like blackout drunk or anything like that intoxicated. Maybe he's trying to have a cup of tea just to warm up before he's going to make the walk back to his apartment. Either or. He also ended up reading some of his emails and writing a few emails and making a to-do list while he was in there. He's in the office for like roughly 30 minutes, actually. Weird. So he does a number of these things, gets his to-do set up for the next day, and then we see him leaving the office. This is right after 4 a.m., I believe 4:03. The man outside, the mystery man, he's already gone. He had left after Trevor had gone inside, which made me think, I'm like, I wonder if it is a drug deal situation. I wonder if it could have been something like that. But I want to call attention to something else strange that was seen on that footage. You see, when Trevor first came there at 3:36 a.m. and he had first met up with the mystery man outside and then called security and got let in, 2 minutes after he got let into the building, there are two other figures that show up and seem to hang out at the gate. Those would be the two coworkers that we would later find out were connected to this. It's unclear whether or not they knew the man. It sounds like investigators ruled them out entirely, but I did think it was strange that those two showed up at the gate and actually didn't go inside the office, and also happened to show up 2 minutes after Trevor had arrived.
So they did not show up to the office.
No, they were. I mean, they didn't go into the office, but they stood at the gate.
Into the office.
Yeah, they stood at the gate in front of the office. They just showed up and stood there.
But they happened to already be there?
No, they showed up after Trevor went inside. So like 3:36, Trevor sees this mystery man outside at the gate in front of his office. Security lets him in. 2 minutes later, two other coworkers show up at the gate where the same mystery man is standing.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's so fast and confusing, the timeline, but does that sequence make sense? It's a little eerie.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to think of like what those two coworkers were doing. Like, were they coming back to maybe like come and get their stuff from the office? Totally presumable. But if they stood there for a little bit of time with Trevor and that mystery man.
They weren't with Trevor, I should say.
They weren't. Okay.
They were not with Trevor at all.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
they showed up alone.
Well, I guess I mean like there was an interaction there though, right?
No.
Oh, no interaction.
No interaction. Trevor was not with them. They did not see Trevor.
Okay.
So when Trevor showed up 2 minutes after he got let inside, that was when the two other coworkers showed up. Only 2 minutes later.
Okay. Well, I guess it kind of makes sense then that they wouldn't have any sort of connection, I guess, here. Something like nefarious could be at play. Like if police like totally ruled them out, it kind of just seems like they might be showing up to get their stuff too.
But they didn't go inside is the thing. They just showed up at the gate. They never called security. So maybe I was assuming, I'm like, did they show up to the gate and they just stood there because they were like hoping? They didn't have cell phones. They were hoping so like security would see them or something and let them in. And then they were like, screw it, we'll just come back in the morning. Because it's never really explained why those two other coworkers just showed up at like 3:40 in the morning at the gate and just stood there for a few minutes and then left.
Yeah. Weird. Or like maybe did they think about going in and then they decided not to for some odd reason? It's very bizarre.
Could have been that. I'll assume police did their due diligence in this, but I also thought it was strange that it's never really explained what maybe their relationship was to the third component who was there, who is the mystery man in all black. Because they were there at the same time as him. He's still there at this point when they're at the gate and they're like, should we go in? Should we not go in? The mystery man is just like standing right there.
But there's no footage of them interacting with him?
It doesn't look like it on camera. There's footage of all three of them, but they're standing at different distances from the gate. So it's actually kind of difficult to make out whether or not all three were talking or if just two of them were talking to each other and the mystery man is standing there in silence. But the sequence of it is just bizarre.
Yeah.
Mystery man there for a half hour before. Then Trevor shows up. Him and the mystery man talk. Trevor goes inside the office. Mystery man stays there. 2 minutes later, 2 coworkers show up. Maybe all 3 of them have a conversation, and then the 2 coworkers leave, and then the mystery man leaves. And then, only after 4 a.m., that's when Trevor leaves the office on foot alone.
That's the weirdest part, is the mystery man lingering while Trevor's inside and then leaving. Because it almost seems like if he went in, let's say he went in to grab something for the mystery man, like that would kind of make sense. And then the guy leaves. But why would he stick around after Trevor went in and Trevor...
I completely agree with you. Because if we were talking about this, like maybe saying it was some kind of like a drug deal meetup or something, after the exchange has happened, he's going to go, right?
Right.
Unless it's those random 2 coworkers who were like trying to talk to this guy as well, but it didn't seem like it.
Well, or if it was a drug deal, and I don't want to like harp on that too much because who knows, but like he could have been saying like, hey, do you guys want anything? I've got whatever on me. And then the coworkers, the other 2 are like, let's get out of here. Like that guy's weird, or we don't want anything from you.
I wish I was clearer in the research about like what the timing was of each of them walking off, if they all walked off as a group in different directions, the 3 of them at the end, or if it was like the 2 coworkers left on their own and the mystery man left after, or vice versa. If the mystery man walked off after like a minute of the 2 coworkers showing up, and then the coworkers lingered and we were like, should we go inside? Should we not? And then they finally walked off. But I mean, again, county has been dropped the ball before, but I'm going to trust that they did their due diligence with those interviews, and they were like, no, these guys are entirely cleared in terms of alibi. They had no relation to the guy who was standing there. They don't really know who that was. But most importantly, that man has never come forward, which I do think is nefarious.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly famous case in Dublin, and it was incredibly famous at the time. If you were seen on camera and you knew where you were standing that night and who you talked to, you would more than likely come forward to clear your name that you had nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
But that never happened. So what happens after Trevor leaves at 4 a.m, because he is seen on camera yet again? So what do we know? Trevor ends up leaving the office. He had tried to call Glenn, I believe, one more time around this time, and he couldn't get through to Glenn. He actually ended up leaving a voicemail because it's like 4 a.m, and Glenn had deleted that voicemail because it didn't seem relevant before they actually knew that Trevor was missing. But he remembered the voicemail said something to the effect, "Hi, Glenn, I missed you there. Just on my way home. All going good. I'll talk to you tomorrow." Glenn said he sounded very level-headed. He sounded clear. Nothing seemed wrong. But this would be the last time that Trevor has ever been recorded speaking to anyone. This is the last time his voice was recorded. So 4:03 a.m. After that beverage he had in the office with Carl, Trevor's out on foot. He made that phone call, and then precisely 11 minutes of time would pass where we don't actually know what happened. He is not on camera anywhere, but we can assume that he was walking in a specific direction because of the footage that is recovered at 4:14 a.m. This is when Trevor is seen on another security camera passing the AIB bank, and he's holding his umbrella. And I think there's a screen. Do I have a screenshot of that? I swear to God, I do.
Yeah.
Okay, you can see him. He's walking on like a desolate, dark and kind of dreary sidewalk very late into the night, and he's holding his umbrella totally alone. This is 11 minutes after he was last seen at 4:03 leaving. What I will disclose is that the man who is seen later by investigators has been cleared. They no longer believe he is connected to the initial man who was seen, the mystery man, in the first gate footage. But 30 seconds after Trevor is seen on that camera outside of the AIB bank, there is another man following him in head-to-toe dark clothing. For years, I'm not even kidding, for over 20 years, people assumed that this was the same exact man who was seen at the gate. Investigators as of 2023 have ruled that out. I'm going to put that out as a full disclaimer up front, that the man seen following Trevor was not at all connected to the man who was seen at the gate, and he was completely cleared, had an alibi, went home, no relation to this whatsoever. So we can assume that Trevor was alone for the majority of that walk. Would you agree?
So it's very... Well, I'm curious as to how they determined. I guess maybe that guy came forward and said, "That's me in that footage, and I promise you I didn't do anything," or something. But
I think it was something like that from what I read.
How they ended up clearing that guy, because it's like, who's out in a storm at 4:14 in the morning?
To be fair,
trailing someone.
People thought the same thing for 20 years as well. But there was I think there was a 2015 or 2016 documentary that was done on this that tried to dispel some of that, and they were like, you have to understand that this was a drinking night in Dublin,
Mm-hmm.
and Trevor was not the only one at 4 a.m, like walking on the street. And they actually showed a lot of footage to prove that there were actually men and women walking together at like 4 a.m. Like, it was much more heavily trafficked than I think most people anticipated at the first pass of the story, which dispelled a lot of the initial story of like Trevor's walking alone. It's dark. It's late at night. Somebody mugged him. Somebody like abducted him. People are like, no, this was a very well trafficked area, even at this hour.
Mm-hmm.
So that even adds a little more mystery to this.
Do you know if this is a really, I'm really throwing this out there, but if there were
This,
any like bodies of water, like bridges around there?
indeed, there were. Indeed,
Oh,
there
okay.
were. There was a Grand Canal, actually, which would have been on the same footpath that he was walking, which was a large part of the initial investigation, which is actually what I'm going to shift into now. Because once Trevor is finally reported missing, that is the first thing they go to. They're like, could this be a scenario of a young, drunk person who just slipped into a body of water and drowned?
Mm-hmm.
There are a few things to dispel that, which I'm going to get into when we discuss some of the theories. And one of them happens to be that his cell phone did not go dead for a period of days, allegedly.
Mm-hmm.
So let's first piece together and uncover some of the investigation. Trevor is last seen, like I said, on camera at 4:14 a.m. This is at the corner of Bagot Street and Haddington Road in pursuit of his apartment. My confusion around this part of the story was mostly about his roommates, because I had read that he had two roommates when I first started doing the research on this, but then I'm going to have to dispel that. I don't think that could have been true, because we would actually learn that Trevor's disappearance goes unnoticed for something like 4 or 5 days. If he had roommates, that would have been noticed.
Oh,
Right?
yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Unless the roommates were just out like partying or something the
which I
whole
saw
weekend.
no
But
record of, but I did see initial reports that said he had, I believe, 2 female roommates, I think. But I'm going to toss that out entirely. Maybe at a certain point he did, but at this point in his life, I believe he was living alone. So he is initially, the following morning, marked absent from his job. He did not show up for work the next day at 9:30 in the morning. And this was leading into the weekend, which was kind of the problem, because for that first day that he was marked absent, there were no red flags thrown up for his job. They're like, maybe he's just really wildly hungover and we're going to get a call or like an explanation on Monday morning. This leads into the weekend where nobody had really heard from him, and his sister had tried to call his cell phone multiple times and it was still on from what she remembered, but she never got through. But she just thought, oh, he's probably busy, because what's interesting is he had told his parents, I think a week before, because they invited him to come like down to his hometown and like stay with them and, you know, share stories about the trip to Alaska. Like, what did you see? What were the ice caps like? He had said he can't, because this was the weekend he was going to go Christmas shopping for everybody. So that was the reason, part of the reason his sister was like, oh, he's just out and busy. Like, that's why he's not calling me back. This carries in to the end of the weekend until I think we arrive at Monday morning, when he is still not at work. That is when his job raises the red flag, and they contact his emergency contact, which would have been his parents. And they say, your son has not reported to work for several days and we think something's wrong, which is, oh my God. Like, I can't imagine that horrible feeling, even from like an employer scenario, like your coworkers feeling like your coworker, something might be wrong or they're going missing.
Well, and the last place that most everybody saw them was at the company holiday party where they were getting, drunk. I mean, that never bodes well in terms of that being the last thing you saw, even if it was just all fun and joyful times.
Also, it's just like, the fear of like how many days could pass where somebody actually never notices that you're gone.
Yeah.
That really stuck with me. I think about that sometimes, about like how long it would take for even somebody to notice that I'm missing.
God, don't say that, baby.
Well, I'm just, no, but it's a real thing that comes
in LA.
Well, it's a real thing that comes to my mind where I'm like, I mean, because I'm not the type of person who has to, I don't call people every single day, especially even people in my family, to like check in. I'm more of like a once or twice a week kind of person. So I wonder, I'm like, there are people who were like that, who could have been very similar to Trevor, where like maybe 3 or 4 days pass and nobody raises alarm to be like, something's wrong. I haven't heard from them, you know?
Well, especially if he was living alone. I mean,
which I'm pretty sure he was. I mean,
yeah,
there's only so many ways you can slice this. So, like I said, he is officially reported missing to his parents. And I believe the initial search efforts actually came from just his family and friends circle because they had traveled to his apartment. His dad, I remember reading, went to his apartment and was banging on the door trying to get an answer. Nothing. And I think his brother joined in on those search efforts, and they had initially just started to look around and like ask questions about like, where was he last seen? Did anybody like see him come to the office like around this time? Like what happened the night that he went missing? And it was that same day that he was initially called in as missing to his parents that they officially went to the police and reported him as a missing person. And that's when the real search efforts ramp up, I think the following day. So let's see. This is, December 12th officially. I wanted to get the exact date for you. It's a full 5 days. 5 days after Trevor initially was walking that path and seen on camera that nobody has seen him since. So those search efforts, they ramped up, and they would continue actually for a strong period of time because this case did catch a lot of media traction in Dublin. I think this carried on into January 2001. So we're going to say like a full few weeks to a full month of real search efforts, including aerial searches, including foot, using canines. And they first did look to that canal. They were like, this has to be a body of water situation where he fell into the water. They never found anything. They never found anything in the water. And the other thing that investigators believed could dispel that was that, again, his sister had called multiple times and remembered that the phone was still on, which they believed if he had fallen into a body of water by accident, the phone would have been dead instantly.
Well, I mean, I hate to hear that nothing came up of it, but I mean, thank God he didn't drown. I mean, what a terrible way to die. It made me think of Riley Strain, right?
There are so many cases similar to, this is quite literally the bedrock of the smiley face murder conspiracy of like young male professionals or this type sort of walking home after a bar and then slipping into water, or somebody puts them in a body of water. That's the mystery. But I actually think there's a greater question here that gets missed in a lot of this research, because if we're ruling out the idea that maybe he's not in the canal, they never found him in the canal, there's no evidence he fell into the canal, what are we left with? And the first thing that comes to my mind is Alaska, that trip to Alaska. There are questions about this Karen character that he had gone to visit. And the more his family and friends started to look into it, they started to question whether or not Karen actually exists, because nobody had ever met her. And as they would dig further and further into his emails and all of the written records that he had left behind, there seems to be no record of any communication with Karen. So that starts to beg the question, was he really going to Alaska for her? Because he did go to Anchorage, but was it for Karen?
Do they know for sure that he went to Alaska?
That's what the ticket took him to. Yes. It did touch down.
He got on that plane. They know.
That they don't know, actually. He did describe in detail to his family, like everything that he had seen in Alaska, which you can totally fake and like self-prepare if you need to give a story to somebody. But what we do know is he definitely was on the plane that took him to Los Angeles, I believe.
Oh, right.
Whether or not he actually caught his connecting flight to Alaska, unsure. Very possible he could have stayed in Los Angeles, which begs the other question. Who is the Jamie girl that he was talking to that his dad found in his emails? Was she a Los Angeles person that he was going to see?
Can I also just ask, he went there how many days prior to the company party?
I don't know the exact length of his trip, to be honest, like how long he was there. I can't imagine it was more than a couple of weeks, but the trip ended and he flew back December 5th. Party happens 2 days later, December 7th.
Yeah. I guess I was just trying to think of like, is that enough time for like, if there was something weird that happened for him to like make a mental switch, like that something was off.
Well, a lot of people
trying to imagine what took place on that trip that would cause him to, I just can't, I don't know.
Well, I think that's a good thing to clue into, actually, because if we think about some of his behavior upon his return, it's a time of heavy drinking, although none of his coworkers, I should say, really reported him to be like out of sorts or to be like very upset. But people, front in a very good way sometimes. But he was going to be drinking a lot. He rejected the plea from his parents to come home and like tell them about the trip. So he didn't want to talk about the trip right away. He said, I'm busy. I have to do Christmas shopping on this weekend. I'm just wondering if any of that plays into maybe the aftermath of something that happened on that trip to Alaska, if he really did go, because from what I read, he was unannounced. Maybe he wasn't received very well, and then that just soured everything. Do you
I
know what I
have the
mean?
weirdest feeling he didn't go. I don't know why.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just there's something about, first of all, I guess the timeline of like being, go with me here because I know this is a stretch, but like
Oh, please. We've
being
got lots of wild theories here, by the way.
being new to a job that young, taking
Mhm.
off that much time, going so far by yourself to somebody that nobody knows, your family has no idea. Like I just know for me, and like I think most people that I know, if they're going and they're dating somebody and they're leaving the country for multiple days,
Mhm.
missing work, most people are going to have some sort of an inclination about that person or like what that trip was about. Or it just seems like it's so out of nowhere that he took this trip.
A little
It
bit. I
almost
mean,
seems
I
like
don't
an
know if
alibi to me for like why he could have been gone doing something else and it covered up whatever that was.
I
I
will
don't know what
say
that would have been.
no, that's entirely possible. There's no record of what that could have been, is the
Yeah.
thing. If that is the case, he covered his tracks well because they couldn't find anything in any of his written history, his call history. Like, this is a high profile case for Dublin. They never found anything that could suggest any form of a double life, which is what I think that alludes to. And I don't know that he would have taken the trip unless it was his friend that offered, like, hey, I can get you a free ticket. Because he got a free
That's
ticket.
also so crazy. Yeah. Huh.
So it's about more so the investment, I guess, of his time and whether or not this person, this Karen person, if she was real, was worth it.
And that person never came forward. Like nobody.
Nothing that I could find about it, no.
That's so
Which is
crazy.
also like,
Yeah.
wouldn't you participate? But maybe
But maybe she
maybe
rejected him. So
yeah,
she was like, I
that's
don't
what
want
I'm
any
saying.
part of
She's
that.
like, listen, she's like, we had like a fling in Dublin. She's like, I really didn't expect you to like show up. Like that would be jarring if you met somebody overseas and then they showed up in your country. You would
Of
probably
course. Yeah.
want to distance yourself from that person, and then you might already think that they're on the fringes of something going on upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
So then if you suddenly find out that like your rejection then maybe followed something where they went missing, maybe you would instinctively distance yourself from that story and not want to come
Yeah.
forward. But everything I read was that police have and investigators have never been able to even confirm that Karen was a real person.
So weird.
And we still don't know who the Jamie character was that his father found in the email. But I actually want to talk about something that might tell a little bit more of the story. And I had never read this before, and I think it's so interesting. I did not come up with this timeline. I was actually reading about this pretty deep in Reddit. And when I did a little bit of the map tracing, I was like, wait a second, you're right. I was like, why does nobody talk about this? So that CCTV footage, right, where we know that he's last seen on camera at 4:14 a.m. So we can basically say like, okay, we know that he was walking on this specific street. He was on this path, which would have taken him to his apartment. I believe he was on Haddington Street. This is why that's significant. Because when he had originally left his office, he was going in the direction of his apartment and he would have been on Bagot Street, which meant at a certain point he crossed over to Haddington. The question is why? Because the original street he was on would have taken him directly to his place. That is the most efficient way to get to his apartment. The path that he was taking was going to go by this canal, and it would have added something like 20, 25, maybe even 30 minutes in the rain on foot. So my question is, why did he decide to take that route instead of the other one? Is there some significance to that?
I mean, to go meet up with somebody is the first thing I thought of. They live on, what is the name of the street?
Well, his apartment complex I don't think it's on Bagot Street, but he left Bagot Street to go over to Haddington Street.
Haddington Street.
Haddington.
Could somebody have lived on that street that he wanted to go hang out with is my first thought. Or God, I had a really weird thought, just kind of trying to link it all to the mystery man. But like, does the mystery man live on that street? Is there something in it for him on that street? I don't know, but I think to go, it's either one of two things. It's going there deliberately, or he's wasted and just trying to walk off the booze, or he's disoriented and walks away. But I just feel like he's already with it enough to have a cup of coffee and tea. Seems
carrying an
pretty
umbrella.
odd.
When you're wasted, I don't imagine people who are very drunk like carrying umbrellas for some reason. I know that sounds stupid, but like truly, like when you're that gone, like maybe that's the last thing that you do. I just feel like you do more things that are like, I don't know, a little like less logical, and you
Well,
might like
unless you
pull
live
your
in
jacket
Ireland,
up kind
where
of thing.
you're used to the rain and the booze.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I
But
I don't get the sense either, really, that he was all that drunk from the people who interacted with him. I think they would have made more mention if they were like he was wasted. Like we had to get him a ride home.
yeah,
There was no way he could have been walking. It didn't seem like that was the case. So I started to dig a bit further because I was like thinking what you're saying. I'm like, what the hell is on that street that would like prompt him to take that route? There's a couple of theories here that I think are specific to like him walking on that street. One, back in the year 2000, there was this shop. It was like a 24-hour shop. I didn't include the name because I read it and I was like, I can't pronounce that. It's too Irish. It was a 24-hour shop. So I was like, okay, that is a reason to like go out of your way if you're like, I want to get some food from this shop. It's like think of it like a old school 7-Eleven type place. Or maybe he wanted to get cigarettes or something, but that was going to be open all night, and that was up that way on Haddington. So I'm like, that could have been reason number one. Reason number two that he might have been up there is that there's this like well-known, and again, this is some local lore type stuff, almost swore. Apparently, back in like 1999 to 2000, there was this house on Haddington that was kind of boarded up and it was pretty run down. And this was like a bit of like a somewhat sketchy area of Dublin. And in this house, it was known to be like kind of like a drug den, but from the outside, there was a lot of like prostitution that was going on there.
I
allegedly.
literally thought that was one of the first things I thought.
Well, this plays into possibly his drunken confusion if he thought that maybe what he was walking into was a brothel, and it wasn't at all. It was like a proper drug den in like an abandoned house, and
Yeah.
he got mixed up in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe bought something and OD'd there, is what I was thinking.
I just have in my gut that the mystery man and this place are linked in some way.
I have to assume the mystery man is involved in some way, shape, or form, although he's never seen again on camera with him, and we have nothing other than that initial suspicious gate footage to connect him to this. Why would you not come forward? Why would you not clear your name if you have if you just happen to be, unless you're a high profile person who's already wanted for some other crime and you're like, well, I was there, I did talk to him, I'm not related to this in any bad way, but also I've got a warrant out for like a drug charge on this, so I can't go to police and like
I
give
feel
my
like he
story.
probably has something to hide, whoever that guy was, if he's connected to drugs or a brothel. Or that was literally one of the first things I thought, but I was like, no, that's too crazy. Like thinking that maybe he had kind of teed up to Trevor, hey, there's a place like down the road, I can hook you up, I can, kind of acting like not a madam, but like,
Yeah, I mean, like
tipping him off to something.
I can see that. I can see it. It just seems like an odd thing to like jump into a 2-minute conversation with for how brief they spoke.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, but maybe not actually. I mean, maybe like how would the sequence of that like conversation go? It's like Trevor walks up and he's like, cold night or something, like small talk starter, and the guy's like, yeah, freezing. And Trevor's like maybe a little drunk and he's like, you been out? Like where you been? He's like, oh, I was at like Buck Whaley's and we had a company Christmas party. And then the guy maybe says like, yeah, are you like looking to keep the party going? Kind of thing. Are you looking for something? Like trying to offer him drugs, maybe.
Thinking. Yeah, because it's like, why was he hanging out there for 30 minutes? It's like he knew that people were going to come on by. Like,
that's the thing that I can't get out of my head. I'm like, why that place of all places to hang out? Like you hang outside of bars and like corners near like where people are actually coming out, not in front of a banking office at like 4 in the morning.
Because I don't think the guy would have known there was like the company Christmas party that night or anything like
that. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, who's to say like, that? I mean, and who's to even say that anybody in Trevor was like specifically going to leave the company Christmas party after party and then be like, I've got to run to the office. Like nobody would know that.
Yeah. It seems like it was wrong place, wrong time, but that guy had an agenda, in my opinion.
Maybe just to like send a guy over to this place where he's like, if you want to pick up something, he's like, head up to like, I don't know, 421 on Haddington. He's like, it's just like 20 minutes up the road. He's like, and we'll take care of you. So that leads me to the other question of like, so let's say that was the intent. He gets to this place, assuming it's some kind of like a brothel, but it's actually what is effectively a crack house that he's going to. He goes inside. Does he get mugged and then accidentally killed in the process of the mugging and they get rid of the body? Or does he actually buy something and does it there, ODs, and then they have to get rid of the body? Like, what actually happens there to the point where 5 days would pass and Trevor is a missing person?
Well, I think the fact that we've never found his body and we don't know where he could have gone off to in Dublin, I guess it just my the Occam's razor of it for me is that he came into contact with somebody
Mhm.
that did some sort of ill will to him. Um,
Do you,
sure, I guess, yeah. I mean, I think it's totally plausible he could have gotten to this place and then wrong, crowd to be hanging out with that late, and then something happened to him. Maybe he got rowdy. I don't know.
it's possible. Defensive,
Um,
maybe, or maybe they tried to take his money, he fought back, and then that was, I mean, we're hitching so much on this like allegation that this house existed as the thing. I will
yeah,
just say this is only something I've seen in like local lore of people who were like, I was a local in like 1999, so like people knew about this house on Haddington. I don't know how true that is. I'll put that out as a disclaimer, but it is something to contest with because I do agree with you that something happened where he came into contact with somebody who made sure his body went missing.
yeah, 1,000%.
Because the other side of this is that he took his own life, and people are suggesting like maybe he jumped into the canal, which I'm like, I also think that's very unlikely that people like take their lives. Well, people jump off bridges, I suppose, but this, I don't think this was like a bridge jump type canal. It was like just get in the water type of place. Like it's not like a high drop, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. The other thing is that he seems like he genuinely, I mean, aside from the only thing that's a hiccup for me is this like whole Jamie Karen business. Like, could that have really taken a toll on him?
That's what
But he
everybody was
just
saying.
seemed, he just seemed like he enjoyed life. He enjoyed his
Mhm.
job. He enjoyed his family. And he was just kind of starting out this career. So it's, because I think like going to the company holiday party and stuff and hanging out with everybody. And there's just certain like, jovial spirit about that. But then again, kind of like you said at the very beginning of the pod, like that's a really rough time of year for a lot of people.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. It can kind of go both ways.
And we said this in the last episode too, that like some people do present with a jovial disposition right before they're on the fringes of something when it comes to self-harm
Yeah.
because they know they're at the finish line.
Yeah.
That could have played into it. I just think there are a couple of things that are difficult to ignore. I agree with you that the Occam's razor approach is to assume that he came into contact with somebody and that they, whether he was killed or he accidentally overdosed, they took part in getting rid of the body because it would implicate them in some way, shape, or form. The things that we cannot ignore is the mystery around Karen and this bizarre trip to Alaska that came 2 days, or he came back from 2 days before he vanished. And two, that the mystery man at the gate, one was there, two has never come forward.
Hmm.
Those are the things that make this feel all interconnected. And I actually even ran through an even crazier theory where I was like, is it possible that whoever this Karen person was, if she was real, or whatever business he had, let's say in Alaska, whatever he was doing there, or LA, is somehow connected to the guy, the mystery man who was waiting outside of his company? Is this some kind of like, okay, I'm going to put out a disclaimer, a big disclaimer, because this is, I'm not saying that any of this is true. I am just trying to exercise a theory here. But Trevor works for a very high profile financial institution, specifically on the tech side of things when it comes to asset management. He has access to things that maybe a lot of people do not. Access that some people, high profile robbers, let's say, would want to utilize him for or blackmail him for or pay him for, whatever that scenario is. Is it possible he was approached covertly a very long time before this and was part of an operation to infiltrate, to extract funds, or somehow create a hole in the system where somebody, from a tech standpoint, could gain access and withdraw funds? And is it possible that that trip was a cover? It was an alibi, so that this was like the week before and it was about a planning thing. It was about planning and trying to execute this on a specific night. And maybe that was the whole reason that he was going to show up back at the office at like 4 a.m. to do something internally when there were very few people who were there. And this was part of the plan because the mystery man who was standing outside of the office was a part of the operation and knew that this was a specific time. They were supposed to meet there. And Trevor was supposed to go inside and supposed to do whatever he was going to do in the darkness of night in that office alone.
Lord, that's like a spy movie. I mean, that would be truly remarkable if that was all interconnected. I guess my only thought is that's a lot of responsibility to entrust in a 22-year-old.
Well, that's my point of like why Trevor goes missing. He goes inside, gets spooked because there's a coworker there, or chokes, and he's like, I can't do this. So he like wrestles around for like a half hour. The guy ends up leaving, and Trevor goes out on foot, and he takes a strange way home because he's like, I got to take a back road home or something to get to my apartment. Again, I'm spitting up insane narratives in my mind, but I'm like, he's taking a back road to try to avoid maybe.
No.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm like, it's so nonsensical that you kind of have to exercise like a little bit of creativity with the theories. And I'm like, if he takes this strange route home, but still ends up getting caught on his way back home, is that possibly what it's about? I'm just still trying to figure out how it's all connected. The trip to Alaska, possibly being a cover, and the mystery man who already knew Trevor would be at that bank.
Yeah, I think it all hinges on the mystery man, for sure. I like, to me, honestly, the Alaska trip, yes, it probably does hold some sort of significance, but there's just so little that's known about it that I just don't know how it really connects to this evening in particular. So for me, I'm just trying to figure out what was said in those couple of minutes that made him want to go inside. And then the guy was gone. The guy wasn't waiting for him. Like, that is the weirdest part of this whole case to me. Why didn't the guy wait for him if there was some sort of connection between the two of them?
I was assuming maybe he got spooked from the other two who showed up. The other two employees. Because I agree with you. I'm like, if he was like, if they were in cahoots or like this was like a coup or something, the guy would have waited for him outside as like, I don't know, the muscle for like the operation of how it's going to unfold. But then suddenly other employees show up at the gate because maybe they had the same idea where Trevor's like, I'm going to head to the office because I want to grab my umbrella. Maybe they got the same idea. So they're really not connected to it at all. And they're like, oh, we should stop at the office too and get our umbrellas or something, or our coats.
You know what I am sort of leaning towards is that this guy is hanging out. He's kind of, like I mentioned earlier, kind of stalking prey, trying to see who looks vulnerable. And could there be another person that is in cahoots with the mystery man that he kind of teased up to, and he says like, hey, there's going to be this kid that's coming down the road that's wasted and you ought to go after him. Don't go after, these two folks because they're together, they're paired up. Go after this vulnerable kid.
I can agree with that. I can totally see it. The thing that throws it off is that Trevor
went the wrong way.
He swapped streets.
Yeah.
Took the wrong street.
But maybe he could have felt the presence of somebody following him. And so he thought,
that's the question of like, why go so far out of his way? Why cross the street and like add so much time to your trip? It's either because you want to go somewhere because you want something, or you think you're being followed.
Yeah. Oh my God. Poor kid. That's the idea of being in the rain alone and the thought of somebody trailing me and I'm kind of out of my own, like I'm out of sorts because I'm drunk or something. That's so scary. I feel so bad for him.
I feel horrible for the whole entirety of the story, and for his family, for his friends, and for the people who really put so much effort into trying to search for him or find some kind of closure to this case, because it truly is so mysterious.
Yeah.
He was in such a high trafficked area from what I read at the time for the last moment that he was seen at 414. And of course, that footage, it was disproven, like nobody was following him, as it turned out. That it just makes me wonder, like, if he was abducted or he was mugged or jumped or something, when did it happen? Where did it happen? How did nobody see it or hear it? Like, it just seems so stealth.
Yeah. But I mean, at that time of night, like, that's when all the worst things happen. Those are like the witching hours, and things happen in back alleys, and people that are up to no good are waiting because they know that's the witching hour. They know that's when people are vulnerable. They're going to be drunk. They're going to be, having a good time and have, feel like they're invincible. And then all of a sudden something happens.
What's the quote that your dad says all the time about that? Doesn't he have one?
Oh God, he's got a couple. It's nothing good happens after 2 a.m.
That's it. Yeah.
But the hour got progressively later as I got older. It was midnight and then it was 1, then it was 2.
Yeah. Well, when I was working in corporate America, nothing good happens after 9 a.m. Let me tell you something.
God. That's true, baby. That is true. It's that. And then my dad always used to say, never look a fiend in the eye. Which
it's true.
We're looking at each other right now.
But baby, that is all I have got on the mysterious case of Trevor Deely.
Wow.
It is a true Irish mystery, and people still talk about it to this day because the case is quite old at this point. I mean, we're almost 25 years into this, and truly the greatest break was in 2023 when they finally ruled out the man who looked like he was following him at 414. That was the greatest, the most recent break they've had.
I got to give it up to you too. I really felt like I was there this entire time. Like there was a moment where you were talking and I always like say that when it feels like cinematic, I feel really like I'm in it with the research and everything. There was a moment where you were speaking and I legitimately felt download. I felt like I was on that street, like waiting.
I think I got a little bit lost while telling the story too. Cause like it's so specific to like one location, I guess. And not that I've been to Dublin or anything, but I can see it very clearly in my mind, the sequence of events for some reason.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember the moment that I had last night, like at which point in the research I felt that strange thing. Let me go back and look actually. Hold on. Because I remember clocking it and being like, remember where you were in the research when you started to feel this.
That's so, what really is unnerving to me too is thinking about the moments he was having that cup of coffee or cup of tea, that was sort of his like last safe moment.
Yeah, in the company too of a coworker.
Yeah.
Which again, I will say Carl has been completely ruled out as well. Everybody who was like within the vicinity of him, like the security guard, like the coworker, the coworkers, like everybody was eventually interviewed and ruled out in this case. And we're going to assume it was done well, but of course police do drop the ball. I don't remember specifically where it was, but I think it was whenever I wrote about him leaving the office at 4:03 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
That was when I started to get this sense that I was like, something in this room feels weird. And I got a little like freaked out and paranoid.
Well, not to be like too woo-woo, but maybe you were kind of downloading the feeling of him feeling like he was being watched.
That's what I thought. Actually, you know what I'm remembering now with the Michael Negri case was when we were talking about the theories, the moment where like weird stuff started to happen and my security system went off.
Oh, yeah.
Was when we got to the theory about him being sex trafficked. That was the exact moment that it happened.
Oh, I actually just got full body chills. Like truly.
I mean, I paid attention to those things like that. Not necessarily because I believe one thing like one way or another, but like I just choose not to ignore it because I'm like, I don't know. It just feels like there's a reason that either that hit me in that way or maybe there is something to the story that like I am downloading, I guess.
Yeah. Someone's trying to tell you something.
But yeah, him leaving the office at 4:03, that was when I first started to feel it, where I was like, I feel like the feeling of like there's somebody sitting in the room with me is exactly what came to my mind.
Oh, God. I'm feeling it kind of right now. Like I really do feel like I'm in Dublin right now, like in this space. It's weird.
Well, you got one ghost looking at you right now. That's me. Oh, babies.
Oh, babies. Creepers. That was a ride. Thank you.
That was a lengthy.
Really,
apologies.
really
it was so long. There was just so much detail that I like got stuck on where I was like, oh, I want to include this. I want to include this, that I didn't want to give it up. And there's even more to the story behind it, if you can imagine. But thank you for going on that ride with me.
Oh my God, absolutely. Nothing brings me more pleasure than us theorizing, going.
It really is like one of the greatest parts about the show, honestly. I so enjoy getting to like run through the case as if it's like a proper investigation we're looking at, and then just riffing on ideas about like, would this make sense? Why this doesn't make sense? That's the beauty of CreepTime.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Donut Patrol sitting there having their cup of joe.
Baby, I'm 2 seconds away from being Donut
I
Patrol.
know,
It's noon and I have
right
not eaten yet. The second you said Donut Patrol, I was like, well, don't knock them till you try.
You're like, where is one?
I believe there's a Winchell's somewhere up the street. I gotta have one. All right, we'll wrap this up. We'll cheers to some Magic Mind. But Creepers, yes. I want to thank you so much for listening to this case, to Trevor's story. We are gonna have the images, the screenshots. I guess I didn't ask you too much about the screenshots you saw, but did those hit you in the same way?
Me. I mean, Creepers, definitely go check out. I think most of our listeners probably have found our Reddit by now, but if you go and you look at those screenshots, it just gives you so much more. I guess that whole like download thing we talk about, like you will visually get an idea for Trevor. You'll get an idea of the spaces he was in. It just it colors the case a lot.
The images are immensely helpful. I know Sarah listens to the show. Hi, Sarah, if you're listening. But Sarah. she says that all the time. I've heard her say it multiple times. But she's like, the pictures really, really like elevate these cases in a way that we appreciate as listeners, is what she said.
Totally. Oh, that's awesome.
Well, thank you for going on the ride with me. Thank you again to the Creepers. Thank you to Magic Mind. Thank you to everybody who bought tour tickets. But thank you to all of it, Bybee. And specifically, thank you to the McCafe for getting me through these 90 minutes.
The Golden Globes. We just watched them. That's what we're like, and thank you. Oh,
you are a light. You have brought a light into the room. That's me doing Cynthia.
Holding space.
We're going to see you guys on the next one. But for now, we're going to say goodbye.
And good luck, y'all.
Catch you later.
Bye, Creepers.